the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zahrt, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today we are witnessing the heliacal rise of Tamaryn over Half Moon Bay.
Hello.
Why do they call it Half Moon Bay? What is a half moon?
There is a bay shaped like half of a moon here.
But what does that look like? A half moon, right? Is it a quarter moon? Is it partial crescent? You know what I mean? Like we're astrologers.
Moon.
What is a half moon?
Yeah,
yeah. Is
exactly.
it the full moon's the whole? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Anyway.
I get you. I'm personally a waning third quarter, so that seems pretty close, right?
Waning third quarter, so a square.
That's a half moon. Yeah,
there you go. So you're a half moon and half moon.
Exactly. So thank you for having me. I am a huge fan of what you're doing. I'm a supporter of CAELi, and I've met you a couple times at Norwalk, and just am very inspired by your whole thing.
Thanks so much. So much fun to share astrology with people. So tell me, what was your first entry point into astrology with books?
I come from music, so people are going to be listening to this that don't know a lot about astrology. So I try to give a mix of some more esoteric things and also some more mainstream things. So the first book would be Linda Goodman's Love Signs, right? Which I'm sure a lot of people on this podcast have mentioned, because my parents' generation, Pluto and Leo generation, right? They always had that book. Everybody, right? And they have like The Joy of Sex, the Kama Sutra illustrated, maybe some Trungpa Rinpoche or something like that. So that's a pretty iconic book. And if you're a young girl and want to like look up your crush, you look in there and see what they're attracted to, right?
Yes.
But for me personally, since that's such an iconic book, I tried to look back and think on what books actually brought the concepts of astrology into my life early on. And so the first one I have is The Little Prince, which is an illustrated children's book.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, he journeys from planet to planet and encounters different characters. There's like a Saturnian old man and all kinds of archetypes. And for me as a child, I'm very Saturnian, and I have a lot of like themes of I ran away from home very young, and I've just always been very much of a loner, even though I've been part of communities. And so the images of the Little Prince, it's just like him, this tiny little child on this deserted planet in space. And that feeling is just, that's what it feels like to be a human on Earth in general, right? Whether you have my story or not. And the idea of just passing through the archetypes like that, like the tarot. So that's a very early imprint, I think. And then one of my first jobs when I was a teenager in New York was I was a palm reader. And so when I was younger, I came upon the book Palmistry for All by Cairo, right? 1916.
Nice.
And that was the first time I saw the idea of embodiment of the planet, because the illustrations are of, hands with planets, the symbols, the sigils for the planets on the actual skin. This is the mound of the moon, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was probably the first time I thought, oh, okay, so astrology is, the as above, so below thing began to emerge through that. And then the last one was the Eagle and the Lark. Bernadette Brady, it's her first book on predictive astrology. And the reason I brought it up, because it was the most poignant book for me in actual astrology.
Okay, so that was the one that changed the perception, like beyond. So we go from like Linda Goodman's Love Signs through a lot of like graphic novels and esoteric texts, and then we land squarely in Bernadette Brady.
That's right.
What was it about Eagle and the Lark that convinced you to be an astrologer?
I found Brady through the esoteric star community, people in your community, people that are talking about doing star magic and star witchcraft and all these things. But then I found Brady through that, trying to figure out what my stars meant, getting so much from my readings and needing to dig deeper. Then I realized like, oh, okay, Bernadette Brady read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica and figured out her own correlations. That is cool. I want to do something like that one day, right? Where you actually contribute through your own data and through your own faith in the cosmos and put it all together as your own new kind of like she built a cosmos off the real cosmos. Like, I can't think of a cooler person, you know?
Yeah.
And she's such an outsider, and she's so punk. And in this book, The Eagle and the Lark, like I mentioned earlier, I ran away from home young. I am very Saturnian. I always feel like an outsider, even though I'm an artist and part of communities. And in that book, she says, first of all, that she never felt a part of her family or her community, and that the only way she found a place to locate herself in the universe was through the stars. And then in the intro of the book, there's a thing with the eagle and the lark, my heliacal rising star and setting star, which is very linked to like your purpose or your diamond or your true will, and like how you're incarnating that into the world. She has this beautiful analogy of how the myth of the eagle and the fact, which is my heliacal setting, the lark, the little bird, come together and make the music of the gods. And she's using it as an analogy for what also makes a good astrologer, because you need the technicality and the skills of the eagle and the intuition of the lark. And so I cried when I read that. And that's when I felt like the universe was giving me the message, like, no, you can actually be an astrologer.
I love that. That was your lightning bolt moment.
That was it. Beautiful one. And, you know, the eagle is literally the lightning of Zeus, the lightning bolt moment.
Yeah. No, there's definitely goosebumps. Okay, so speaking of being located somewhere, I am going to send you all the way out to a different bird. The constellation of Cygnus has a new star that appeared to Kepler and Tycho, and they wrote about it because, you know, at that point in the Aristotelian cosmos, nothing could happen beyond the moon. And suddenly out of nowhere, there was a brand new star in the sky. Like, this is impossible. So we begin to see this falling apart of these perfect celestial spheres. And so I'm going to send you to this supernova, and I'm going to allow you to take 3 books. What are they?
I love this. That's the coolest intro ever. I think about like David Bowie's The Black Star when I think of that, like the appearance of the rogue star, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm out flying on a comet in space and I don't know where I am, or, you know, a new star. So I would bring Brady again, her book of fixed star and planet combinations. This is like her cookbook, the short one. And I have it here behind me. It's like literally tattered. It's falling apart because I use it so much before I had Starlight. I would make people handwritten reports out of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I learned it, you know, and now it's in here, not totally the whole sky.
I was going to say, is it in your mind now? You don't even need a copy of the book.
That's the ultimate goal, but I'm not there yet. That's for sure. But now I have Starlight, so I get the big cheat. So anyways, what I'm imagining is if you're stranded in the middle of space, you can locate yourself with the stars. And on top of that, if you're homesick, you could check, you know, the mundane star transits of the time, because you don't really need to be on Earth in a geocentric model. You could just think about the stars where they are over the whole sky, blanketing the whole Earth, not just the ecliptic, the path of the ecliptic. So I don't know where I'd be on that star, but hopefully somewhere I could see from the perspective Brady has. If not, I would have to rewrite. So then we've got Marsilio Ficino's The 3 Books of Life, which is a Renaissance era book. You know, he translated Plato and brought all of these ideas of being part of the great, you know, world soul, the great chain of being, the hermetic life, you know, making it a way of life. And I'm not an expert on this book. This is a book that I've just started reading, so I thought I'd bring it with me, you know. So I have some reading.
Yeah, and there's 3, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's 3 inside of 3. So there you go. Worlds and worlds.
Exactly, right? But it is like, it's a way of how to live. If you're stuck somewhere in a new world, a new star, it's like you can locate yourself with Brady. You can have a handbook of a way to live, you know, at the height of humanity, like the Renaissance era of like bringing divination and science and magic and health and nature all together.
Imagine stepping into a room of 5,000 astrology books, turning a corner and stepping into a room of 2,000 more. The Celestial Arts Education Library is every astrologer's dream, and it can be yours. I invite you to come support CAELi before you can visit physically. Your support will mean the creation of 52 new episodes of Within Orb next year, 4 issues of the CAELi Review, our inaugural journal, and countless book talks, events, classes for our community. Visit our website, www.caeli.institute/support, to select your level of care. Please help support CAELi into the future, our future, so that we may study the future together. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the show.
And then I have the Picatrix, which is like, your last ditch effort of what you need if you need to change the system, if you need to hack the matrix, because that's the only book we know of that has real specific astrological instructions on how to make talismans and put these intelligences inside of them and, hack the system. So I would want it with me to figure out how I could do that out there.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's the only one, but it's definitely one of the most popular.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think I have never read like the Tamaryn, but it's funny because it sounds like my name, Tamaryn. And then I have the Agrippa on this list as well. Do you have any books that you would suggest for like specific astrological, like in the tradition beyond that?
Well, the tradition is distorted by people's translating things that they could utilize and also things that they could take religion out of because they wanted to create the perception that you could do astrological magic without necessarily a spiritual component. So the Shams al-Ma'arif, which was recently translated into English, has astrological magic in it, but you can't take the Islamic culture out of it at all. The Sufi text is very much steeped in knowledge of Arabic and knowledge of, various types of spiritual practice. And so you can't make it something like quasi-secular. And so I think that was the book that was used by most people in the time. And the Picatrix was sort of the more like, okay, like that's there, but that's not my street magic,
Yeah, exactly.
So by the translators, they were able to take the Picatrix and make it palatable to the Christian West. And that was not possible with others. And I think that those are just two examples, or that constellation between those two texts is an example of how various astrological texts have been translated or not throughout time.
Yeah, and these books in particular that I'm talking about are like collections. They're almost always students of a tradition that are writing, like it's like their notes that they've learned from all their different teachers.
So maybe you will write a Heptameron.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I got to astrology from magic, but I get less and less interested in trying to change things and more interested in just knowing how they work and watching them,
So the operations of the Picatrix are more about developing an intimacy with the cosmos as opposed to this like...
That's why I like it. That's why I like studying these things. I actually, have an election for Sirius coming up. I'm making some jewelry as an experiment. And not just, experiment like, I don't believe like what you're saying. Like I definitely am steeped in a connection to the divine through this work. But I also am interested in if it works and how it works and experimenting with it and seeing it in the tradition of sort of the more chaos magic stuff I come from when I was younger, just actually doing it and not just sitting there and theorizing about it and seeing how does it show up in my life. But I'm not like trying to figure out how to, change the archonic system of reality through magic. I like to see if it works, but it's not my ultimate goal. It's like, I don't like that we live in a world that doesn't feel connected and that there's no empathy and that, where the human project is going in this age of Pluto and Aquarius is very scary. And I think that, the last of this Uranus and Taurus time, there are people like us talking about, go to the woods and carve into a rock and try and see if, you are part of something greater than your own self, your own ego, your own self reflected in, the narcissist pool of your phone, etc. So these are why I think these things are so valuable now.
And that's why I think also developing a physical library is important, is that, we have all of these, like you said, the narcissistic pool of your phone screen, and you have PDFs and these pixelated documentations of various transmissions or even like illegal PDFs getting shared. And it doesn't quite replace the physicality of being around a book and being around all of the books at the same time. That kind of tactile immersion, I think, is also speaking to that Uranus and Taurus, Neptune and Pisces you were speaking to.
Yeah. And then as Pluto, is in Aquarius, and then Uranus goes into Gemini, we are going to get the combo, right? Like this Uranus and Taurus time is, time for you and time for me to be like sitting out here and actually touching the tactile things and interacting with these ancient texts, bringing them back in the community, all the people doing the translations and all the exciting stuff I was talking about earlier. But, I am talking to people about, working on some projects. I'm interested in AI and things like that. But I like the idea of doing it ethically, where it's like we will have little robots that are telling us all this information. But, maybe they will also say, here's some recommended reading, go elaborate it. Hit the CAELi library up. Here's your answer. But, you should really read more, because that's what my best teachers told me. Every time I learned, I thought I knew something. And it's like that thing. The more you know, you don't know. And if you access in this futuristic era we're going into to all information, we're already in that with the internet, right? But where we're going to be, where it's like actually in a microchip in our brain or whatever the fuck they're going to do to us, we still need to go and touch a book. There's a transmission there. We still need to talk to another person, the oral transmission, right? All these things, the humanity, we can't lose the humanity even when we cyborg.
Right. Okay, so let's not lose that humanity. You are now in charge of introducing a new person to the world of astrology. What is your series of texts you would turn them on to?
When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, my journey through magic and the, whatever, all these names, the occult, whatever you want to call it, finding purpose, finding a location in the cosmos, considering what the cosmos even are. And along that journey, you can get like lost at the Pantheon bar in Holy Mountain, Jodorowsky, like where everyone's trying to sell you an idea. And like you might find one that hits. But in the world of magic, especially, which is what led me to astrology, you're going to see like a million versions of Plato, the Timaeus, being called its own new idea. Someone's going to say they came up with this new model of reality. I mean, the Timaeus invented Atlantis. It's basically everything that's not Abrahamic model of God at that point, other than the Vedas, in the Western, I'm talking about.
Right.
There's a ton of amazing books in the 3,000 year period from Egypt and from, Buddhism and Hinduism and everything. But I bring up Plato's Timaeus because this is the one for Western astrology. This is what we use, this model of spherical realm, the invention of time, the demiurge. And these Gnostic models of the demiurge, where they talk about it as this evil demon who is imprisoning you. And we can look at astrology like that. We can look at our chart as a prison, right? As our karma, like a death sentence. Or we can look at it more like Plato did, where he talks about it as like this beautiful artist who's designing these ineffable forms and shapes, these same shapes that when you squint with the naked eye and see a star in the sky reflect back to you, right? These like different hedrons or whatever, these different triangles and circles and things. These are the the sacred geometry or whatever you want to call it. There's a beauty to that, but it's not a prison because of the great year that he talks about, where the shift of the axis between the earth, our perspective, the eye, right? The birth chart, I have behind me this poster that our friend Cam made, which I love looking at every day. And it has many of the traditional astrology techniques condensed, right? And it looks more and more like the prism of a human eyeball, sphere, right? When the chart is like a prophecy, right? You stand on earth and you look in the sky with your little baby eyeball, and it's taking in the light of the stars through these sacred shapes and ineffable forms. And a lot of these ideas come from Plato's Timaeus, are influenced by the Orphics. And, we don't have a ton of Orphic literature, but I find this fascinating, and it's just a good way for a beginner to cut the line through all the confusion,
I love that idea of the chart as eyeball. And I also love that you say eyeball, because it's just such not only like the reference to sphere, right? Ball, sphere, but also just, I had a friend once say like, Jen, why do you always say eyeball? You can just say eye.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the astrologer in me, like the proto-astrologer coming out.
Also because the eye is you, you are the eye.
Right?
This is the ball of the eye, right?
Yes, this is awesome. I'm seeing so many art classes happen right now before my eyeballs. but also the optic nerve. So these ideas of translation of light, this Hellenistic emphasis on light and the absence of light, and the aspect of aversion. Wade Caves once described to me that if you have your hands next to the plane of your head, that you can't see them because there's a blind spot there. So that's your 30-degree situation. And if you take your fingers out to the 150-degree, you hit the part of your eye that is the blind spot. But it's a blind spot because that's the place where all the light gets in your brain. It's the optic nerve.
Right. And it's so close, like the 12th house.
It already literally is. That aspect of aversion is inside the eye.
Exactly. The perspective, it is your perspective, because we are fractals of light. We're all stardust. this is how we're receiving consciousness. This is how we are building consciousness. The as above, so below thing can also be looked at as we project our stories onto the stars, and that's how we grew our consciousness from the very beginning of human consciousness. And at the same time, the concept of astrology that they are projecting their stories onto us is true. It's a co-creative thing. And through the eyeball light is how I see it. And the chart looks like that. It just shows you the map of light being received by the consciousness, by the soul.
Amazing. So is Plato the only text, or do you have more on your list?
I have more. So
okay.
Basically, I try to get to, some sort of people who talked about very iconic cosmos, the model, the order of the universe. And these things have influenced so many other schools that you will learn on your journey through astrology and magic. So the Sefer Yetzirah is a book on the Kabbalah, and it's considered one of the oldest ones in the tradition of Kabbalah. And it's the perfect place to go to see astrology and the tree of life come together on the model. Because if you look at Luria, who I'm a descendant of, Kabbalah, you're going to be looking at rectification, going back and through these worlds, and the tikkun, like trying to heal the broken shells and all this stuff. There's a lot of responsibility in that. But if you're looking at it through an astrological model, just the tree, the way that they use it, they put on the tarot with the golden dawn and all of that, you can just see it as a very simple, clear model. You can learn it quite fast. The top is the source, and it emanates down through the spheres of the planets, just like we are here in this model where the planets, the archons are controlling this reality, right? Until it manifests down on Earth. So that book, if you don't want to get lost in the sauce on what Kabbalah is in relationship to astrology, just read that directly. Source text is what I'm trying to say here.
Yes.
Okay, so the next book I have on the list is Prometheus the Awakener, which is an essay by Richard Tarnas, written in 1995. I bring this to you because I'm sure Cosmos and Psyche has been mentioned several times on the pod by now. And this is a short, abbreviated, but powerful essay about Uranus. And we were talking about Uranus and Gemini earlier, right? About how I think this is going to be the cyberpunk revolution, right? Uranus and Gemini. After us, Uranus and Taurus, witchcraft people, or, nature homesteady people. Anyway, so let's talk about Uranus. Prometheus. The god Uranus is not Prometheus, but Richard Tarnas makes a case in this essay that the character Prometheus is more appropriate for the planet Uranus, because he steals the fire from the gods and gives it to the people, right? And the essay is about how that is in the context of Western culture's evolving consciousness, scientific progress, and the tension between like freedom and control.
Yeah, and the genius, that spark of genius. Yeah. If you do anything with Uranus, you have to go through that essay for sure.
So there's that. That's a great intro. And if you don't want to go through all of Cosmos and Psyche as an introduction to astrology, that kind of sets up the framework of what he's saying further. And then I have The Soul's Code by James Hillman, which I'm sure someone else has mentioned, but I have to mention it because it takes these ideas from Plato and from all these magic sources and religious sources about purpose, the will, the true will, the daimon, or the music of the spheres, the melody of your life, all of these things. He talks about it as the acorn theory, right? And I really like his take because he says that not only do you have a purpose that you're manifesting, but that it's not just nurture versus nature. It's not just you have a thing you came to do and you were just born that way and you're ready to go. And it's not just like your parents and all the trauma from your childhood is a prison. It's the combination that was always supposed to happen to build. It's very Saturnian in that way, right? To forge through the suffering your great work. So that's liberating to me. It takes you away from the feeling of fate and fortune, I'm stuck here, that you can get when you look at astrology for the first time. You can say, oh no, I'm stuck in this pattern. And you can say, no, the suffering is part of my true destiny. And then you can that's the Stoic thing, right? You can surrender to the story a little bit and then co-create with it through these other paradigms. So I think that's a good one to look at. And then lastly would just be like some Carl Jung's writing on astrology too, because Hillman is a descendant of Jung, so you have to mention him.
Yeah. Wow.
And then Brady's star book.
The comprehensive one. Brady's Book of Fixed Stars.
Yeah, and I did have the Agrippa because I mentioned Ficino earlier, but the Agrippa is similar, where it's like a collected work, like we were talking about, where it's like, yeah, they're not the only books, but they are these like collected works of the tradition through like different lenses of different cultures. The Picatrix and Ficino and the Agrippa, it gives you a lifestyle thing, which is what I like about it, is like living it versus reading about it and conceptualizing it, seeing how you embody it in your everyday life through talismans, through what you eat, through the stories you tell, through the art you make, through the relationships you have.
Right. So for everyone listening, don't just read the books. Now you have to actually do the homework in the books. So the thing that's cool about Eric Purdue's version of Agrippa, that's the latest one out by Inner Traditions, is that Eric spent, I think, about 10 years retranslating it from the Latin and identifying the sources for all of the, because it's called 3 Books on Occult Philosophy, and he takes the footnotes to a whole nother level, because then you can see exactly where Agrippa was getting this quote or this quote or this quote. And then you start to realize that it was a compendium of so many books that it's not actually even Agrippa in there. He's just it's just the way he puts it together so that you can have this encyclopedia.
Yeah, that's what we're saying thing we were talking about before. It's probably the same thing with the Picatrix. I'm not an expert on these books, but they are collections of students of other teachers. You know, they're their notes in a lot of ways. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what's cool. And we need like Eric characters as we move into this new age of technology, right? Because we want AI to be like Eric. We want it to say, okay, here's the prismatic view. Here's the quick information. And then here are the source texts, the footnote. Go as deep as you're willing to go. That's your path. You know, right. What's your acorn?
But we still need humans to gather and discuss. And speaking of gathering and discussing, I'm very happy that you spent time with me today here telling me all about your journey through astrology and books.
Yeah, there's this great quote by Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction where he says, we will always need somewhere to go on a Friday night with your girlfriend, you know, like until the human project is over, like we need to gather and we need to communicate and we need to share. It's not all just books, but we can't get rid of the books. The books are such an achievement.
And also we need to write them, and we need to write them together and read them together and talk about them together. So thank you so much.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. Like, I really appreciate what you're doing. When I first met you and you told me you had this library, it blew my mind. Oh. And just as I've been increasingly part of the astrological community, I have seen the people that are gathering around what you're doing, and it's truly beautiful. These are special people. And they are all ages and come from all different kinds of backgrounds. And it just feels like a constellation, you know?
I love it. I love it. I love that you see that. And thank you for that reflection. And to everybody listening, you're invited to join us.
If you found me through music and you're listening to this, music is really powerful, but this is the same as music. All of this is like the patterns of consciousness and reality and the divine. And then the way that you feel the divine through music, you can explore it through other patterns. That's the Uranus and Taurus thing too, I feel like, and with Neptune and Pisces has been like, take the dream of your art and creativity and make that your life. Live that.
Mm-hmm. So if people want to learn more about you and what you're up to, can you share what you've got going on and how we can find you?
Absolutely. My music is just wherever music is found. And I have a practice that I do readings, and you can find my Instagram. It's Shop Major Arcana. I make things there too, inspired by astrology and magic.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. So cool. What an honor.
Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next time.